So starting the new parak on Daf Mem Amud Aleph. Hayubaytkin b'sheva chakiras. The Mishnah says, so we're talking about, let's remember, we're talking about Dinei Nefashos. And Dinei Maminis, the questions are pretty basic, but there's a whole rule of Drishas and Chakiras that are required by Dinei Nefashos. And just to set the stage, the way it generally works is there are a set of questions that are asked that are the drishas, the chakiras, that are intended to make the edus. These are the questions you ask Adam, right? The interrogations that you do to Adam. These are intended to make the Adam capable of being mezumah. That means Adam, in order for the edus to be qualified edus, we're just starting the new parak, Amem Amud Aleph. This is just the intro. So in order for an aid to be a kosher aid, it has to be edus that's capable of being contradicted, of being found to be Eidim Zaymimim. So you have to ask these questions to set the stage, to have them say what happened, where it happened, so that you can then come and another aid can come and say, no, you were with us at that time someplace else. If you don't know who these people are and where it happened, you're not going to be able to do that. And then there's a second level of questions that are related to, that are trying to basically to catch the Adam, and you compare their answers to see if they match up. And that is just to disqualify them. It's not to make them Zaymimim, but we want to, as a general rule, we're always trying to be makel on Dinei Nefashos. We're always looking for reasons to acquit someone who has his life on the line, who's a subject to capital punishment. So over there, we ask questions just to trip up the Adam to make sure that they're telling the truth. So Zak the mission. There would be biting them with 7 chakiras, and they're going to say what the 7 chakiras are. And these are the things that are, like we said, are used to determine whether they can be Adam Zaymin. So we say be'ezer shavua. The first thing is which years of the cycle of Shemitah. Every 7 years is a new cycle of Shemitah. So which years it was, essentially which group of years it was, and then be'ezu shana, and then which year is it? Meaning, in which year of? I guess that's the way they used to identify years. They didn't have 1963. We saw that in Shtaris they would use the year of the Melech, but maybe for common use it was more common to use what Shemitah it was, and then what year in the Shemitah. So then we say be'ezu chodesh, in which month, be'kama b'chodesh, which day of the month, and be'ezu yom. And then even if after we said which day of the month, we also do which day, meaning which day of the week. And Rashi explains be'ezu yom shel Shabbos av b'shamru kach v'kach b'chodesh. Even though you already said which day of the month, so why you also would, the day of the week is gonna, you could look at a calendar and figure it out. Av became shein lehem be'ezu yom b'Shabbos hayel lefisha kol hashavua kol hasheva alolu ba'ois lahavian lidei hazama v'shem yesh eitim hazima ve'ein malin al liban cheshbon shel chodesh mayo elu iman oisei hayom b'malkam achar. It means maybe the Adam might know which day of the month it is, but maybe the Eidim Zaymimim will only remember that, it was Tuesday a week and a half ago, but they don't remember which day of the month it was. So in order to lock them down, we ask them which day of the week it is. And then Be'ezah Shah, what time of the day, right? If the Eidim say it was on Tuesday, and then the Eidim Zaymim say, but you were with us in Chicago on Tuesday night, maybe they jumped on a plane from Tuesday morning and they were really in the place where it occurred. So you have to know what time. And be'ezah makom, you have to know the place, obviously, in order to be mazim them. Then this is after so those are 7. We just said 7, and this is the ones that we said. There's a Sheva Chakirs. Now there are these 2 middle cases that two questions that are sort of in neither court, and the Rishonim talk about that a lot. He asked them, "Makir natem oisai." I skipped. No, I'm sorry. Rabbi Yossi, I'm be'ezeh yoim, be'ezeh shah, be'ezeh makom. Rabbi Yossi says that you only have three questions you ask them: what day, what time, and what the place. You don't have to break down the day. We're going to see it's actually comes from psukim. I'm not sure if the psukim are a asmachta, because like we said, there's a cheshbon behind this. Rabbi Yossi is going to disagree about these 7 questions. He boils it down to just 3 questions. Be'ezeh yom, be'ezeh shah. And we, like if he'll say, however he'll identify the day, you don't have to go through the whole question starting from the Shavua through the Shana and all that. Then the Mishnah continues. Makir natem oisai. They asked the Edom, do you recognize who was killed? That means, if we're talking about a case of Dinei Nefashos, which is most typically, in the case we're talking about over here, is where someone was killed, was murdered. So do you recognize who was killed to know if he was a Jew or a non-Jew? There's only a capital punishment for killing a Jew. And then he tartem by. Did you give him hasra? In order for him to be chayiv misa, there has to be hasra. So these are things that like they're in the in between. It means the list of the questions that are bedikas, not chakiris, are things that are not crucial to the case. But these are things that are used to determine whether we can passel the edus by finding that they don't know the details of what happened. But these are things that are necessary for finding them to be. If you don't know if the victim was a yid, like they say he killed someone, but we just don't know who was killed, and nobody knows, then you can't give him misa. And similarly, without asra, you can't him misa. So this is the So that's going to be the question. There's a lot of discussion of explaining why this would be considered as part of bedikas. These are normally, you would assume, these are things that you have to know. The Edom have to say it. You're going to ask them, but not in the gather of trying to trip up the two Edom, but rather, and it's not for hazama. These are things that prerequisites for him to be chayiv, but they're not in the realm of either bedikas or hakiris. Okay, so the Mishnah continues. And that was in the case of someone who killed someone who's accused of being avodah zarah, which is also subject to capital punishment. Esmi avad, over me'avad. You ask the Edom, who did he worship and how did he worship it? Doesn't really make a difference as far as being mechayiv him misa if he's being avodah any avodah zarah. But these are bedikas. These are questions. These are typical bedikas. These are questions that wouldn't be necessary to know, but if the Edom don't match, we can pass the redus. Whoever adds to the bedikas, it's better. The more bedikas, the more questions the judges ask, the more chance you'll be able to disqualify the witnesses and then let the person off. Maisu Badik ben Zakkai ba'uksei te'enim. Ben Zakkai was being baidik Edom on Dinei Nefashos, and he asked the Edom that there were te'enim, there were figs hanging in the place where this happened, where Ritzicha happened, and he asked them how thick were the branches holding the te'enim, the figs, to determine whether they're good Edom or not. Ma ben chakiris l'bedika. So what's the difference between the chakiris, which are the first 7 questions for hazama, and the bedikas that we just said? Chakiris echad aimeni yedea edusam betela. By chakiris, if one of the Edom says, "I don't know the answer," then the edus is batal, because then it's a edus sheyati yachal aziman, and edus has to be able to be subject to hazama. All the original 7 questions determine the time and the place, and if you don't have that nailed down, then the Edom can't be hozam. And if they can't,
so the things that are mentioned are the chakiris or the bedikas?
The first 7 are chakiris, right? B'sheva chakiris. Those are the things for hazama. Then afterwards we started saying After Rabbi Yossi, who was saying bedikas. Those are the things that are used to trip up the Eidim. So by the Chakirus, if someone says, if one of the Eidim doesn't know the answer, then the Eidus is batal. You can't accept Eidus that's not able to be Huzan. Bedikas, if both of them say they don't know, Eidusan Kayamas. The Eidus is Makuyim. That's why it's a little bit difficult that Rashi stuck, that the Mishnah stuck in as part of, Rashi said at least that those are part of the Bedikas. Makir Noisai Hitartim. Did you give Hasra and do you recognize? Echad Kakirus ve'echad Bedikas Bizman Shemachichin Zeh Idusam Betela. Either one of them, if there's a disagreement between the Eidim, that's going to be Mavatal Eidim. That means the Eidim could say we don't know, but once the Eidim, one Eid says one way and the other Eid says the other way, then the Eidus is batal. That's not a kosher Eidus. Echad Oime B'shnayim B'chodesh, ve'echad Oime B'shloishim B'chodesh. One Eid says it was on the second day of the month, and one says it was on the third day of the month. Eidusan Kayemis. The Eidus is still Mekuyim, as the Mishnah explains. We can assume that the two Eidim, one of the Eidim got mixed up. Either one Eid assumed that there was a Iber Yar, there was an Iber month, where they added an extra day to the month when it didn't, or vice versa. But one day off can be explained. But if it's off by 2 days, one says in the third day and one says in the fifth day, Edusam Betela, that can't be mashaj. There's no way to understand it that they're both talking about the same day. One says 2 hours into the day, right? If the classic day is from 6 to 6. So one says it was 8 a.m. and the other one says it was 9 a.m. Eidusan Kayemis. That's people didn't have accurate watches. They didn't have Rolexes. They would go using a sundial essentially, and the sundial was very easy to be off by an hour. Off by 2 hours, then it's batal. That's too big of a difference. People would know that. Rabbi Yehuda says no. Even 2 hours, people can make mistakes. It's too. Their timekeeping was not accurate enough to even know it was 2 hours. I think that's right. We stop eating chametz 2 hours before chatzos, right? Midaraisa, because 2 hours, even 2 hours. I guess this probably this is brought up in Psachim. I don't remember, but vaguely remember something like this, right? We wait 2 hours between midday. Before you don't eat beforehand because you can make a mistake of 2 hours. But echad aime b'chomish ve'echad aime b'sheva edusam b'teila. Shebechomish chama b'mizrach v'b'sheva chama b'mayrav. Because the sun, people can tell the difference between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock because there's a difference between when the sun is still going up and the sun starts going down. That people will know the difference. So then certainly that's going to be a contradiction in the Eidus. And they're both, it's going to be batal. So after you, so this is all we're finished with the Eidim. We finished with the Eid. We asked them all these questions. After you finish asking all these questions to one Eid, you ask him the same questions, and then you check if they line up. This is all things that have been the rest of the Mishnah, this long Mishnah, really most of it has been referenced earlier when we were talking about the dinim of whether you have to look for schus. So we're talking now about after you finish the Eidim, then you start, if the Eidim were check out, so you have 2 Eidim saying that some Reuven killed Shimon on this and this day, then the judges start deliberating, and the first is they say what the reasons are to let him off. Amar echad min ha'edim yesh limud of schus, echad mat hamidim yesh limud of chayva. If one of the edim say I have a schus to provide for him, and certainly if one of the edim says I have a chayva, Or if one of the Talmidim says, I have a chayva to say, Mishaskan I say. Like we said before, Edom are not allowed to give arguments, like we said, because if the Edom will come to give, we're afraid that Edom are going to try to justify, if they said Edis that he's potter, and then, or said that he's, let's say they said he's chayiv, they're going to try to say arguments they should be potter, so they shouldn't be found out to have lied. So, so we say Edom can't just testify either l'chayiv or l'schos. And Talmidim are not allowed to jump in to say argument l'chayva with our general predilection to try to find innocence. So mishask them. But if one of the Talmidim, one of the people sitting, says, I have a schus to say, Malnoisa, you bring him up to the court, to the judges, you sit him amongst them. And he stayed there until for that whole day. And if his argument is a good argument, we take his argument and we let the accused off the hook. The party, the person, the accused says, I have a reason why I should be let off the hook. You listen to him. The judges have to listen to any argument l'schos other than from the Eidim for this specific reason, like we said before. As long as his reason has some substance to it. And if you find a reason why you should go off, patru. So at that point, you're still on the first day. You heard the Eidim. The judges gave their arguments l'chayv l'ptur. If you find the argument l'ptur, he goes off. Bimlav, but if we haven't found the reason, so the Eidim's testimony is standing up, and there's no reason to close down the proceedings and let him go off. You have to wait for the next day. Like we said, you have to do, there's a din of lina. In order to be mechayiv someone, you have to think about it overnight. And during that night, for that evening, after they close up the court proceedings, they stop it by shkia. You can't have dini nefashis after shkia. The judges pair up and they continue discussing the case. They wouldn't eat so much food and they would not drink wine. And the whole night they would still continue to discuss the case to try to come up with a reason to be mezaka. They weren't, like we said, you can't find a reason l'chayv, even though we saw earlier that there's a shita that says by the Gemara din, but prior to that, there's no opportunity to bring up reasons to be mechayiv. Ulamacharas, and the next morning, mashkimin, they get up early, ubayin lebezdin, they go back to bezdin. Hamazaka imani v'zaka, umazaka ani b'mkaimis. We had this earlier. The people who said the judges that had said he should go off, they say, I feel he should go off, and I still remain thinking that he should be free. And they say their reasons. And if you remember, we had the people who said that I'm still hold with my reason to be mechayiv, they can now change it and say, but I thought of a reason why I should go off. To b'davar, if they make a mistake, meaning one of the judges says, I thought he was chayiv, and now he says, I think he's potter, or he says, I think he's chayiv, but now I have a new reason. So they have to remind them, like we said before, because if they'll change the reason for chayiv, you're going to have to wait an additional day. There's going to be a din of lina on the new reason to be mechayiv. So therefore, it's important to know that the reasons are the same as for the previous day, and that's why we have the court recorders. We had either two court recorders or three. If they're able to come up with a reason to let him off, you let him off. Imlav, you start making a count. You get to the Gemara din, you make a count of where the votes are. Is it l'chayiv or l'ptur? At any point, it sounds like, I don't quite understand exactly how it works. It sounds like before you even get to a vote, it sounds like there could be a patruah by acclamation. If everyone agrees to a reason to pater, then they could let off the hook. But then you have to have the things that were not agreed upon, then you have to have a vote. So that's what I'm not exactly sure like how this matches up. We keep on saying if you find that Leptur, then you let him go, and now we're saying you make a count of the votes. It sounds like there weren't counts before. So if you don't pater him, you make a count. Shnayim asa mizaken ve'echad asa mechayven. Two of them, 12. You have a bezdin of 23, and 12 of them say he's innocent. Ve'echad asa mechayven, and 11 vote to convict. Zakai, he goes free because you only need one more to be mizaka than to be mechayev. Shnayim asa mechayven ve'echad asa mizaken. And if it's the other way around, va'afilu echad asa mizaken ve'echad asa mechayven, or even if you have 11 saying, even if you have, rather than having one more convicting, you have equal amounts, 11 of each way, and the 23rd judge says, I don't know. Even if you have 22 saying he should go out free, or they say he should be mechayev, and one says he doesn't know, then you don't have a quorum. You have to have 23 judges, and a judge who says I don't know is not considered part of the minyan. So even though you have 22 saying he's pater, so no matter what he would say, he would still go off. Yosifu hadayanim. You add judges. V'kam yosifin shnayim. You add 2. Now, obviously, in the case where you have 22 being mizaka, and you have 2 coming on, if they vote to be mechayev, he's still going to go free. But what if it could even be, what if they say also ene yedea? So you keep on adding judges, or in the case where you have 11 and 11, and one said I don't know, so then you add 2. So then if one says pater, one says chayiv, you're going to have to keep adding on more. And in the original case where you had 12 saying chayiv and 11 saying pater, and you add 2, so if both of them will say chayiv, then he'll be mechayiv. And if both of them will say pater, he'll be pater. And if they split, then you're going to have to keep adding more. So you keep on meisifin, become meisifin, shnaim ad shivim ve'echad, until you get to 71. 71 is the maximum that you're allowed to have on a bezdin. And then when you have 71, shloishim v'shishim v'zaken v'shloishim v'chamishim v'chayim, what happens is you have 36 saying he's pater and 35 saying he's chayiv, zakai. Shloishim v'shishim v'chayim v'shloishim v'chamishim v'zaken. Then what do? Done elu connected elu. Then you they keep on discussing or vice versa. Like we said before, when you get to the Gemar Din, you could change your mind either way. So there doesn't seem to be a concept of a hung jury. They just have to stay there until they come to a decision. It's not a jury, it's judges. The judges have to come. Someone has to change their mind.
Yo, what do you mean by until you have a quorum?
That means in the beginning, when we talk about 23, we have to have 23 dayanim. If someone says Eini Adea, he's not counted toward the 23, the number of 23. So even though you have 22 judges saying he's pater, and we know all you really need is 13 judges saying you're pater, but you need to have 23 judges involved. And if one's saying Eini Adea, he's not counted toward the 23. You don't have a court of 20, a bezdin of 23. You need a bezdin of 23 to give a verdict.
So if you have 22 that are saying, let's say he's chayev, and one says he doesn't know, it doesn't count.
It's also, yes, certainly. Then certainly you're going to wait. But yeah, right. It's the same thing. The problem is you have to have 23. So unless the next judge can give an opinion, one of the next 2 judges give an opinion, you're just going to have to keep adding until you find someone willing to give an opinion. It doesn't say what happens if you add. I wonder how this works. I wonder if the ones who say Eini Adea, when we say you have a limit of 71, does that mean of judges who are saying they know? Right? Because I think we had said you have 3 rows of 23. Yeah. I mean, that was for the Sanhedrin. So my question is, I'm just wondering now, based on what you asked, if when you add judges, are the judges that we say the maximum is 71, is that just as far as judges who say an opinion, but it keeps being even? You add to 71. Does that mean that even the judges that say Eini Adea, are those excluded for them to getting to the maximum of 71? I think it would have to be that way. Because otherwise, there's another possibility. What if you have 22 judges that are 12 saying, 11 saying Potter and 11 saying Chayiv, and then you add another, you have 22 plus one who's saying any day, and you keep adding more any adayas till you get to 71, then you'll have a case where you don't have, there's no advantage one way.
Also,
You did mention.
the any idea, does he leave the bezdin?
So that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that I don't think he's counted in the count. I don't know if he leaves the bezdin, but yeah.
Because it's interesting, because it's the dig you can make to them from the mission is that once you hit 71, it seems like that's like that special number that once you hit 71, you're good. The mission doesn't discuss that if, of the 71, if someone says, I don't know.
Right, that's what I'm just talking about.
Yeah.
I think the any day is not included in those 71. They're not part of the count. Zok the Gemara, Minoani Mili. Where does this come from? The first thing that we said that there are 7 chakiras, that 7 questions that he ask to determine whether it's Yachal Hazima, whether capable of Hazam. I'll review the Amakra, the Rashtam Chakav Sha'alta Hated. It says Lagabe Irhani Dachas, that you should be Dairish, you should check and Chakarta and investigate. Sha'alta Hated, and ask Hated well. The Rashi says Sha'alta by itself is not really a extra level. Sha'alta is just a question you should ask, but excuse me, Hativ adds an extra stringency, an extra level. So that's 3 lashonis. That is equal to 3 lashonis of asking questions. V'ayma, it says Lagabi, someone who's accused of being Oived Avodah Zarah. V'hugad l'cha v'shamata. It will be told to you that someone was Oived Avodah Zarah, and you'll hear it. The Rashta Hativ, and you'll be Dairish Hativ. So that's 2 lashonis of being Dairish, of asking questions. The Aimer, and then finally it says the Rashta Hashaitrim Hativ. The Gabi Edim Zayin, it also says a lashon of Drisha and Hativ, which are both intensifying lashonis. So that's 3 by Irani Dachatz, 2 by Avodah Zarah, and 2 by Edim Zayin. You have a total of 7 lashonis of asking questions. That's what we get. You have to ask 7 questions of drishas of chakiras. Now, like I said before, I mean, I didn't see this in the Rishonim, but it makes sense to me. The Mishnah says that these are intended to determine whether he's Eidos Sheyachal Hazima. So, and we'll see. I guess when if we see Rabbi Yossi, why he disagrees, but why it should be based on logic of what questions are needed to determine how many, whether he's Yachal Haziman. Why would we use a pasuk to tell you how many questions you need if it's based on logic, based on necessity? So maybe, like I said, maybe it's an asmachta, maybe it's not really coming from the pasuk necessarily. Frag the Gemara. So frag the Gemara. Let's say that we said 3 psukim by Yorani Dachas and 2 by Avodah Zarah and 2 by Edim Zayin. Let's say that's how many each one. It's saying how many questions you need for each one of the 3 types of issues. We're saying on each, by Yorani Dachas you ask 3 questions, and by Avodah Zarah and Edim Zayin you ask 2. Because if not, if the Torah wanted to say that you need 7 questions, why doesn't it say all 7 of the lashonis? For example, by Edim Zayin, by Yorani Dachas. Why is it split it up? Dr. Mara, given the Kulu Bahadi Adadi Ksiva, Mehadadi Yalfi. The Gemara says since they're written by all 3 of these, by each one, they're said similarly. It says Drisha v'Chakira, so you really could have learned one from the other. The fact that it's repetitive, since you could have learned them all from one another, so there's no need to write them all over. So we can learn from that it's meant to be a cumulative counting of how many questions are. How can you say they're all equivalent, that you could learn one from the other? There are kashas on each one has a reason why you shouldn't learn them. When a city is found to be Irani Dachas, the residents get killed, and all their property gets destroyed, which is not the case by Avodah Zarah and Edom Zaymim. They just get what they get. So maybe by Ir Anidachas, we don't, if we just said by the others, I'm sorry, yeah. So if we just said by the others, maybe you wouldn't say it also by Ir Anidachas. So Zok the Gemara, yeah. Avodah Zarah lahanach tati loydam mishachem b'sayif. Avodah Zarah is not daima because it gets a chiyuv of sayif, which is the way that you, one of the methods of misa, and getting sayif is less chamor than I'm sorry, sorry, that's not, Avodah Zarah does not get Sayif. I think Avodah Zarah gets Skila, and the other two get Sayif. So Sayif is less Chamor, so maybe it's only by them that you do the Drishas and Chakiras. I'm sorry, maybe by the more Chamor one, we don't have as many Drishas and Chakiras. Edim Zaymim lahanach tati le'dam shechein tzrichan hasra. Edim Zaymim, the other two need hasra, and Edim Zaymim doesn't. So that's a Chumrah for Edim Zaymim. So each one of these things have a chumrah. Yeah. So let's say maybe that you don't combine the other ones to this because it has a chumrah. You don't ask so many questions. So the Gemara says, how would we know? So how do we know in the end to add all of them together? We said you could learn out one from the other, but each of them has a chumrah that would say maybe the other two should be combined and add up to more questions, and this should have less questions in order to make it more chayiv because of its chumrah. You learn it out from Gzeir Shav of Heitev. It says Heitev by all three of the topics. So tomorrow Gzeir Shava Mufna. It has to be Gzeir Shava that's Mufna. The loy mufna ikal mifrach, because like we've seen before, we've seen that Gzeir Shava, if you have a kasha on the Gzeir Shava, if you could say that one of the sides of the Gzeir Shava, one of the things you're learning from is more chamor, then in order to learn the Gzeir Shava, the word doesn't have to just be the same word that you find somewhere else, but also has to be an extra word in each place in order to learn it, to overcome the kasha. And over here, like we just said, there's a kasha on each one of the three things that they have a chumrah. So they are mufna. They are actually actuals. It should have said it should have said vidar shuvachakru. It should have said by Lagabi. We're starting by Edom Zaymim. By Edom Zaymim it says vidar shu hashaitvim heitev. Instead of saying heitev, it should have said chakru. V'sheni havale michtav v'darshu b'chakru. V'sheni kra b'dibura b'heitev. V'shani kra b'dibura b'heitev. Instead, it used the lashon of heitev instead of chakru, which would have been in the typical lashon. Shma mina afnuye. That tells you that the lashon by Edom Zaymim is extra. V'akati mufna mitzad echad hu. That's only mufna by Edom Zaymim. What about the other two examples? Bishlam hanach tati mufnahu mishum dehav leila michtav. So by the first two, that it's mufna because by Edom Zaymim and by Avodah Zarah, because instead of saying heitev, it should have said chakru. But ila yir and dachas my hav leila michtav, because it did say drisha v'chakir and heitev, and we did three. So you can't say instead of.
Sorry, they should have written what?
Because it should have said instead of heitev, it should have said darshu v'chakru. Instead of vidar, it says vidar v'charak the heitev. It uses the lashon heitev instead of drisha. So it's added an extra word that it didn't have to use. It used an unnatural word, but it didn't have that option by Ir Nidachas because we did say drisha and chakira. So you can't say instead of heitev, it should have said drisha. Haksiv kulu. So Gemara hasam nami ifnuya mufna. Nahavel lemichtav droish tidroish. Like chakar tichkar, it could have said each one of those words twice. V'shani kra b'dibura b'heitev shema min alafnuye. It still could have didn't have to say heitev. Heitev is a strange lashon to use. It should have said darash, v'darash, tidrish, v'chakarta. Zak Gemara, shmai lafnuye. Zak Gemara, fact the Gemara, v'asu nechnachem b'chal v'kaimer. Once we said that we're going to have by avodah zara and by edom zaymim and by yer nidachas, that is going to be misa with, and you're going to have to do drishal chakiris and all of them. We're going to say the same thing by something that's chayiv chanek. The army skila. I'm sorry. We said skila, which is the I think that's what you get. What is skila? I don't remember which one is Yer Nidachas and one is Avodah Zara.
We said with Yer Nidachas. No, Avodah Zara.
Avodah Zara gets skila. Yes, skila is the most chamadika. I think everyone agrees skila is more chamer, and Neragin is for Avodah Zara. It gets basically Neragin is saif, is getting the head cut off. So you learn out Nechnakim, those who get chanek from Niskal and Neragin. Chanek is the I believe the chiyuv for killing someone. But also Nisrafim b'Kal Niskalim, and Nisrafim it learns from a Kal V'chaymer from Niskalim. It's Nisrafim is more chomer than Neheragim than from Saif. So Hanichal Rabban Da'ami Skila Chamura. That's good according to Rabban. That Skila is more chomer. Reb Shimon Da'amar Sreifa Chamura. That he says Sreifa is more chomer even than skila, so it's certainly more chomer than neragim, than saif. But according to Reb Shimon, it's also more chomer than skila. How do we know? Maybe that this we only see that there's a din of drisha v'chakiras on skila, but maybe sreifa, which is a more chomedik, a worse type of capital punishment. The person did something worse. He doesn't get the benefit of having drisha v'chakiras on the edim. Ma'ikal emema. Alam Rav Yehuda. I'm just going to point out, like it just popped into my head, that we said about a mesis that he does not get the benefit of all the being derish chus. I wonder where they would fit. A mesis, I don't remember what misa he gets. In any case, but Elam Rav Yehuda, hine emes nachan, hine emes nachan. The pasuk says 2 times. And it says, so he darshans that these are 2 extra lashonis of Drishas and Chakiras. V'hine emes and nachai. So that's 2 more lashonis that you have to determine the truth of what's going on. Hachad sari. So we actually have 11 lashonis instead of 7. Shava l'shava Chakiras. 7 for the 7 Chakiras. Dal tlas l'gzeir shavim. Like we said, heitev is for the gzeir shava. Pashalu chada l'Reb Shimon lasuya nisrafin. According to Reb Shimon, the extra lashon that we added on here, on top of the 7 plus the heitevs and the 2 for the gzeir shava, the last one is to tell you nisrafin, that since you can't learn it out directly from a Kal V'chaymer from the others. And according to Rabban, also you'll have this extra lashon to tell you nisrafin, even though you could have learned it out with a Kal V'chaymer, we say an extra one to tell you it as well. Megadav bar Ravo was not masking this. Maybe it's coming to tell you that instead of 7 chakiras and to tell you nisrafin, maybe it's to tell you an extra chakira that you should ask, right? We said first what the questions are, how many, there are 7 questions. Maybe it's to tell you there are 8 questions. And nisrafin is not included. They don't get any chakiras. In fact, the most chakiras miyaka. What would be the 8 chakiras? Maybe it's to tell you what time, exactly what time it was, meaning instead of just telling you it was at 2 o'clock, you have to say 2:30 or 2:20. What time in the hour? You would do 8 chakiras. So this is good according to Rameh that says a person who doesn't make that people don't make a mistake. They know exactly what time it is, and therefore you could ask exactly what time of the hour it is. Point those that say that there is more room for people to make a mistake, so you can't ask exactly what time of the hour it was, because people are not going to know that. You should say where in the Yovel it is, which year of the Yovel. In fact, the one we already said which one of the years of the Shemitah. It's to tell you which part of the Yovel. Maybe it's happened 60 years ago, and it seems pretty unlikely to me. But yeah, because it's at least 50 years apart, you think it would come up in the conversation. See, the guy's like 98, 90 years old. And the other madam would say, since we already said in which Shemitah it is, it will come up, that will also tell you which Yovel it is. He won't say it was the Shvuah, the fourth Shvuah, the fourth, seventh year of the Yovel, and it will neglect to mention that it's from 56 years ago instead of 6 years ago. Okay, we'll stop over here. Tomorrow, I'm not certain yet if I'm going to be in shul. I'll send a message a little later.